So make me co-host, sir, so that I can record.
वो होस्ट अब अलाउ नहीं
नहीं
कर
ठीक है, हो गया, ये अप्रूव हो गया. ओके.
ओके यू कैन
बिल्कुल। आजकल फिलॉसफी की लहर चल रही है, इसलिए सब कुछ ओके है।
Okay. So, namaste, good evening, pranam to all the esteemed professors and our young innovative minds. So today's episode is going to be very, very special for us for Philosophy Cafe, as we are completing 1.5 years of Philosophy Cafe today. And Philosophy Cafe has received so much love and good wishes so far. And I wish the same in the upcoming episodes. And we are grateful to all our viewers and participants, professors, scholars for their uh, uh, for their immense contribution and love for wisdom. Here, I must mention that Philosophy Cafe has initiated a new form of academic institution where people join together, discuss together, listen to the great minds, and we have panel discussions, so many other type of academic activities, and no registration, no fees, no qualification is required to learn and enjoy philosophy here. And with the trust to enhance and spread philosophy from this small and unique idea, I'm delighted to welcome today's speaker, who is also very special for philosophy, Indian philosophy world, Professor Balaganapathi sir, who is former head of the Department of Philosophy, Delhi University. I welcome you, sir. And he is a well-known philosophical counselor in India. He did his PhD from the University of Hyderabad. He was with the University of the West Indies, Jamaica, as ICCR chair for Indology and Gandhian studies during 2022 to 2024. His research publications include historiography of Indian philosophy, early Buddhism, bioinformational and philosophical practice in various Scopus indexed international journals. He was also a chancellor's nominee in 2018 to 2019 for the Board of Management of Mohanlal Sukhadia University, Udaipur. He was also a member of the review committee of the Indian Council of Philosophical Research, constituted by MHRD in 2018. Professor will be speaking on Indian philosophy between critique and commitment, K.S. Murty, and the question of philosophical responsibility. So, we are grateful to have you, sir, and I'm delighted to invite you, welcome you in the cafe for the very first time. And over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Shipra, for that kind introduction. Namaste to all of you and Sabhaya Namaha. Firstly, even before I begin my talk on Kotta Satchidananda Murty, I would like to congratulate the Institute of Advanced Studies and Kuruvam School of Advanced Science for this wonderful endeavor, which is to celebrate 100 years of development in Indian philosophy program. In fact, I want to further reflect on this, but I hope I will get some time to reflect on that during my talk. As Dr. Shupra has, it's been continuing for 1.5 years. So that's really wonderful, because if you take 52 weeks, which means almost 76 plus episodes were done, and so much of significant aspects, including philosophers' theories and perspectives of 100 years of development in Indian philosophy might have come up during these discussions on this platform. I really appreciate this endeavor of initiating it, on an online platform. And for that, I believe Professor Balram Singh and Dr. Rajkumar are instrumental. Thank you so much for this very enriching contribution that you are making, which the previous generations, the next generations would definitely look forward to for their further research. And I am grateful to Shipra, Dr. Shipra Dikshit, for constantly persuading me to be a part of this series. Thank you, Shipra, for those efforts. One important and interesting thing is we are looking at 100 years of development in the Indian philosophy program from now onwards to our back, to the past. And it's exactly 100 years since Kotta Satchidananda Murty was born. He was born in 1924, and we are in 2025, okay, which means 101 years. So it's like if we are looking at 100 years backwards, probably we are looking at one of the richest contributors in the name of Kotta Satchidananda Murty. So that is how his discussion on his work is the most appropriate thing to do today on this platform. In the landscape of modern Indian philosophy, if you look at it, Kotta Satchidananda Murty stands out as a thinker who navigated the tension between critical inquiry and cultural rootedness. I would be detailedly explaining this because the modern Indian philosophy was discarded. At least some of the recent Indian philosophers have argued, critically remarked, saying that modern Indian philosophy, since it is being done in English, is
recording
not
in progress.
And there were responses to that have come in terms of Nalini Bhushan and Garfield's work, etc. So, which means these works try to present a kind of tension between critical inquiry into oneself and one's tradition, and also keeping or preserving cultural rootedness of the self. So there is a sort of tension that you find among these modern Indian philosophers, which we will find even in Kotta Satchidananda Murty, but it's not same as it can be found, for instance, in Radha Krishnan or anybody else, because he was almost a contemporary to, or I mean, not contemporary, but they lived together for some time and they had discussions as well. This lecture basically tries to explore Murty's philosophical vision as a sustained response to what he preserved, the core challenge of post-colonial Indian thought, the responsibility to think authentically, not merely in continuity with tradition, but through rigorous dialogical engagement with the contemporary world. Murty's theistic metaphysics, his reflections on being, and his reflections on vibhūti, a concept that he has taken from classical Indian tradition and developed further, and the realm between transcendence and immanence, offer a metaphysical vision that is both spiritually resonant and intellectually disciplined kind of one. This work, his work specifically, if we are looking at Murty's work from a comprehensive perspective, it critiques orientalist, missionary, and nationalist reductions of Indian spirit, and defends Indian philosophy as a pluralistic tradition. The metaphor that he uses is salad bowl of diverse doctrines, not a monolithic idealism at all. No, what I mean by this is the context of his existence, which is like, if you look at the historiography of Indian tradition, during the colonial times, Orientalist scholars have come, looked at India's past and glorified it. And then we had liberal utilitarians like J.S. Mill and others who looked at the same past of Indian tradition and said, this is all dark because it doesn't have any liberal values at all. So it has, the past of India is not glorious at all. It is a dark age. This is how the dialogue between Orientalists and the liberal utilitarians went on. And then we had nationalist scholars who try to reject both of them or participate in it and try to establish India's standpoint by reinterpreting our own theory, our own philosophical traditions, and also at the same time trying to correct the Western notions. So this was the period. This was the context in which we will find Radhakrishnan, Sibjiban Bhattacharya, and K. Satchidananda Murty, many other scholars richly contributing, making their contributions. So if you see this to be the context, then how do you look at this Indian spirit? Some of the scholars, like for example, Radhakrishnan, would have given a kind of a kind of homogeneous perspective by uh, through his readings of Indian tradition. But K.S. Murty strongly disagrees with such kind of homogeneous representation, holistic representation. He says it is the pluralistic tradition that that has to be seen properly. No, you cannot reduce it to a kind of sweeping generalization, right? So that's the kind of perspective with which Murty comes into the picture. And also, I read, I suggest all of you also to have a look at one of the interesting works by our colleague C.D. Sebastian, who is teaching at IIT Mumbai. He wrote an article on K. Satchidananda Murty, in which he calls Satchidananda Murty as heterodox insider. So it's not that heterodoxy has to be outsider. Heterodox person has to be outsider. He says heterodoxy can be an inside development as well. And that's how he calls K. Satchidananda Murty as heterodox insider, while exemplifying Murty as a unique philosophical person, deeply embedded in tradition, yet unafraid to confront its basic assumptions. At times, he was context sensitive, even bordering on the apologetic. Murty's writings nevertheless challenge prevailing dogmas, offering a model of Indian philosophy that is critical, dialogical, and ethically grounded. So basically, in this brief talk that I'm going to give, I thought of touching these points, like why Murty's thought remains profoundly relevant for young scholars navigating the tension between heritage and modernity, and also try to briefly touch upon his work, how his work can illuminate the trajectory and transformations of Indian philosophy over the last century, and also how Murty's work, Murty's idea of philosophical responsibility demands what we demands that we imagine philosopher not merely as a custodian of doctrine, but as one accountable to truth, ethical clarity, and cultural critique. This is what we find from his work. If I have to have a brief, if I have to provide a brief overview of his life, he was born in 1924 and he was graduated from Andhra University in 1946. And his thesis was on revelation and reason in Advaita Vedanta. It could be a coincidence that even Radhakrishnan writes his MPhil dissertation or MA dissertation on Advaita Vedanta, ethics of Advaita Vedanta. That was his first dissertation. So Satchidananda Murty's work, it was published in 1959, his doctoral thesis. He began his career at Princeton University in USA in 1959 and returned to his alma mater, Andhra University, as professor of philosophy in 1960. He taught at People's University, Beijing, China, and later he was enrolled with the responsibility of Vice Chancellor of Sri Venkateswara University, Tirupati, and also Central Institute of Tibetan Studies, Varanasi. He played a key role in the development of higher education in India by accepting the Vice Chairman position of University Grants Commission. So he is not just an educator, he was also an educator administrator, right? So that's the what comes out from his life. He had many honors. In fact, he had honorary doctorates from University of Halle in Germany, Beijing University in China, Russian Academy of Sciences in Russia, and he also he was conferred by Government of India with the Padma Bhushan in 1984 and Padma Vibhushan in 2001. So, which means see, if we are looking at a philosopher who has done substantial contribution to the field of education, not just to philosophy, but to the field of education in India, then probably after Radhakrishnan, he is the, he stands very tall to be recognized and read thoroughly. Let me say briefly something about his mode of philosophizing. As a member of Anglophone academia, as I already explained the context in which he was writing. As a member of Anglophone academia, Murty used the language and framework of the West to draw attention to global scholarship on Indian philosophy, envisioned bringing India into a dialogue with the West. Same as Radhakrishnan. Radhakrishnan was also trying to build a dialogue with the West. Okay. And many more, many other philosophers as well of our time who were into Anglophone academia. He assiduously engaged with Vedic texts and then prevalent trends in Western philosophy as well. He revisited the ancient metaphysical and epistemological problems of Indian tradition with a university-style philosophical training, which equipped him with protocols and styles of theorizing in the West. If we have to have a look at his works that have come, okay, they touch upon many interesting aspects, areas of field of knowledge. For example, he discussed metaphysics thoroughly, and in fact, a period where metaphysics was discarded, he celebrates metaphysics. Okay, so and he wrote on Indian culture, peace studies, Vedic hermeneutics, critical reading of Advaita Vedanta, Far Eastern philosophies. He also contributed to foreign policy of India through his writings. Along with delving into varied themes, as an academic administrator in the form of vice chairman of UGC that I have already mentioned, he authored Ethics, Education, Indian Unity and Culture in 1991. He edited General Education Reconsidered in 1962. And in this way, contributed to educational policies of India in a very enriching way. Murty's useful survey of Indian philosophy since 1498. Now, this is the book that he has written. It was a survey of Indian philosophy since 1498 to 1985. That's where it was published, characterizing the period of time to be into different categories and presenting it. I mean, see, nobody else has done such kind of a work of looking, going back into 15th century and trying to characterize history of Indian philosophy into different categories. Similarly, in his other work, Philosophy in India, Traditions, Teaching and Research, he provides a careful analysis of practice of philosophy in India, pointing out the problems in teaching, research, and practice of philosophy. Nobody else has done this kind of work as well. I mean, whatever that I'm presenting now, if you're asking me what is his unique contribution, these are his unique contributions. I believe he wrote a book, Philosophy in India. This is what I'm referring to. Only recently, Professor Raghuram Raju wrote Philosophy and India, okay, where he again goes back to K. Satchidananda Murty and discusses his work, Philosophy in India. He also, it's like when he, after analyzing the practice of philosophy in India, he concludes that the lack of courage, of conviction, and lethargy among professional philosophers are the only obstacle to the rectification of the situation of philosophy in India. So often our own academic community blames system for not taking care of philosophy properly or supporting philosophy properly. But he presents that philosophy has been supported by the system very well, but our own academicians, predecessors, or our own community, academic community, Anglophone academic community in the universities and colleges hasn't properly responded to the support that was provided by the institutions. And that's what caused the present situation of philosophy in India according to him. This is a very important point, and it has to be debated and properly understood in the context. His two works on Advaita Vedanta, for instance, Revelation and Reason in Advaita Vedanta and the Advaitic notion, present a critical perspective of a non-conventional conformist in evaluating the traditional perspective of Shankara. This is another interesting point that I want to emphasize, that if you look at the modern Indian philosophers, Anglophone modern Indian philosophers, most of them seem to be supporting or going with Advaita Vedanta. Okay, Vedantic pursuit was celebrated to be the highest kind of one, and most of them sided with Advaita Vedanta. Only few scholars have disoriented themselves with Advaita Vedanta and critically observed, made critical observations about Advaita Vedanta and sided with either Visistadvaita Vedanta or Madhva Vedanta. Okay, and you will find such kind of attitude where Professor Satchidananda Murty critiques Advaita Vedanta and appears to be going with non-Advaita Vedantic perspectives. This is another interesting aspect. When I looked at the writings of some of our modern Indian philosophers, probably 4 or 5 of them had resorted or had chosen this path of going beyond Advaita Vedanta. So not considering Advaita Vedanta to be the culmination of Indian philosophical tradition, as some people tend to present to us. The realm of between is based on his lectures on philosophy of religion delivered at Oxford, Britain, and the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla, India in 1963. And he also wrote a book on Far Eastern philosophies based on his lectures that he delivered at Mysore University in India. His book on Vedic hermeneutics is an unbiased perspective of hermeneutical debates on the basis of Western Indolysis. By treating Veda as an object of democratic study, Murty presents Vedic tradition as one of the arguments, argument and persuasion, rather than dogmatic assertion of or mystical experientialism. His work on foreign policy is also worth reading. I mean, look at the diversity of field that he tried to touch, not just philosophy as philosopher, but making substantial contributions to Indian philosophy and going beyond that and contributing to the field of education in general and also to foreign policy of India at that point of time. His Indian Spirit is one of the very interesting works that we should definitely have a look. While closely examining existent notions, sorry, can I continue?
Yes,
Okay,
sir. Yes,
thank
sir.
you.
Go ahead.
Yes, please. I think someone joined and
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, while closely examining the then existent notions of Indian spirit that were advanced by early Orientalists, Indologists, and nationalist thinkers of India, which I have already explained the context, criticized them for their stereotypical depictions by his contemporaries from the West, such as Raincoat and Lacombe, as well as from India, such as Radhakrishnan. So it's not that he rejects the perspectives of the Westerners who were stereotyping us. It is that he strongly disagrees with his own contemporaries, I mean, Indian philosophers as well. So that is one of the interesting things, because I'm reminded of the comment, the argument that was put forward by Professor Raghuram Razu in his books on debates in Indian philosophy, that there were no debates in the modern period. But I would say, no, there were probably some debates that you find. For instance, if you read Satchidananda Murty, he was debating with his contemporaries, his predecessors, strongly, especially the Indian scholars. He pointed out, Satchidananda Murty pointed out that the stereotypical misconceptions about India such as spiritualistic essentialism, lack of progress, denial of life, political immorality, were a result of a selective reading and its uncritical acceptance of the classical Indian literature. In addition to these misconceptions, he criticized three historical interpretations of India that were existent during his time, such as the imperialist view that the lack of historicity, the missionary view that maintained the European civilizing mission of barbarian colonies, and the Marxist indictment that there was lack of class consciousness. In fact, in this regard, it must be noted that Radhakrishnan, when he writes his 2 volumes Indian philosophy, he says, I cannot call my books history of Indian philosophy because there is no historicity as it is conceptualized by the West in Indian tradition. He makes it explicit. Whereas, if you look at S.N. Dasgupta's work, S.N. Dasgupta, in his introduction to 5 volumes that he has written on Indian philosophy, he calls them to be a history of Indian philosophy. And he says, I need not bother about the Western notion of historicity. And that is how I feel happy to call my work to be history of Indian philosophy. See, I mean, I want you to see the kind of diversity that was existent among the modern Indian philosophers. I mean, if you are considering them to be nationalist scholars, nationalist philosophers who are trying to look at our own tradition, even there is a rich diversity that is to be still explored and properly analyzed. And Satchidananda Murty also belongs to that time, and he made rich contributions to this whole paradigm. He challenged the underlying assumption of these interpretations that before the advent of Europeans, India was an impoverished state in terms of both knowledge and civilization. He criticized these kind of notions that were presented by Western European scholars during that time. Murty points to the literature of a long and diversely rich tradition of Indian social political history that disproves the above stereotypes and interpretations. He agrees that most of Indian philosophy is philosophical theology. I mean, this is how he interprets it. Okay, philosophical theology, ethics based on eternal authority or institutions of omniscient sages, transcendental ontology, and speculative psychology. This is how he characterizes his interpretation of Indian tradition. But within these limits, it had not only doctrines such as Mayavada, monism, intuitionism, idealism, but also monotheisms of all kinds, pluralisms, monisms, idealisms, realisms of various shades, absolutistic, theistic, as well as atheistic. After pointing out this diverse picture, he concludes it is a folly to claim that India has had a monopoly of spirituality or mysticism. For Indian civilization was never merely spiritual or less spiritual than Christianity or Islam. This is how he concludes. Okay. To think otherwise is to surrender oneself to a vulgar, egocentric prejudice based on hubris, he observes in his Indian spirit. Okay. Which means if you read it closely, you would see how strongly he disagrees with Radhakrishnan, for instance. Okay. So, I mean, there was always a kind of intellectual debate that was existent among these modern Indian philosophers, I believe, which is to be reconstructed and presented to the students in a better way. He contributes to theistic metaphysics in a rich way. Murty strongly believes metaphysical reflection to be a natural intellectual quest, a psychological necessity, as well as a linguistic need of a human being. There is a tendency in every human being to relate or connect and synthesize the objects of experience which are diverse and disconnected. When the work of synthesis is pursued rigorously and systematically, he views it results in metaphysics. So, see, basically, how do you conceptualize metaphysics itself is a very interesting thing. When you look at when you read metaphysics, it becomes very clear to us. When the work of synthesis is pursued rigorously and systematically, he views it results in metaphysics. Such a quest was named by him as intellectual need for metaphysics. Metaphysical reflection doesn't remain only at the level of intellect for him. There is a psychological necessity as well that demands a unified worldview among all the things which leads to it. Along with the intellectual quest and psychological necessity, Murty also found a linguistic need for metaphysical reflection, which he explains with the example of the term being. For him, the word being, though seems meaningful only at a metaphysical level, he reflects, serves to tie up all ties of language. It must be noted that the transcendence is called being, and every object of our daily life is also called being, which makes us understand how interconnected the concept of metaphysical being, that we talk about, is in providing meanings to each of the ties of language that we use. In the Indian tradition, it is Sat, which is both the supreme reality as well as every object which has a name or form, Namarupa. It is this function of language in coordinating various levels that renders meaningfulness to life and reality. If I have to quote Satchidananda Murty, one of his works, he says, the discovery of levels of language ought to be an argument in support of coordinating level of language and metaphysics, which would serve to juxtapose the other levels and render them all more meaningful by imposing on them an architectonic. So that is how his conception of real, which is a form of being, can be thought of in three ways, such as it is the self-fathoming and self-substantiating ground of what is, whatever that we think. And then it is also the most general sort of unity, the unity to be found at the bottom of what is. The first level, it is what is. And at the second level, it is the bottom of what is. The ground of what is. And it is also the unity of highest sort, the unity of what is taken as a whole. So this is how there is a three-way formulation of theistic metaphysics that he presents to us. This theistic metaphysics is important. I believe there is a lot to talk about this theistic metaphysics, but due to want of time, I would move to another interesting concept that I should not miss introducing, which is the concept of vibhūti that he picks up from classical Indian tradition and reinterprets. The concept of vibhūti tries to explain the relationship between transcendence and immanence. God is the origin of all, according to him. He is also the inner core of all selves. This is God's vibhūti. Being inner core of all selves is what is basically a superhuman power, glory, and sovereignty that the God has. Understood rightly, vibhūti is a mediator between the divine abyss of being and the mortal endeavor to reach up to it. Okay, whatever effort that we make to reach up to it. Vibhūti is the birth of God in man, according to him, while the holy transcendent protects these births of gods. Though this transcendent encapsulates us by being both immanent and transcending us, its nature is beyond our comprehension, according to him. Thus, the transcendent for Murty is mysterious. The transcendence, he declares, is mysterious, for although it is already around us, enmeshing us, involving us in itself, interpenetrating us, its nature is not comprehended by us, for it is not given to us, nor present to us as a datum. We are into it, but it is not presented to it. No, that's an interesting kind of immanent transcendence and transcendent immanence that he brings out through this concept of vibhūti. In all his writings, Murty highlights the built-in limitation of epistemology in respect of the transcendent. He cites quite a few authorities from the West and from Indian tradition to show that the end of our knowledge, we know God as unknown. He makes an interesting distinction between the knowledge of the existence of God and knowing of God. On metaphysical reflection, one may reach a point where he or she may attain the knowledge of the existence of God, but that is not equal to knowledge of God. Similarly, he makes a distinction between attaining the divinity and penetrating it. Attaining divinity may not result in penetrating the divine. Thus, we attain the knowledge that God exists, but he remains unknown. All the concepts which make God's existence known to us lose themselves in that divine abyss, according to him. We thus attain the divine, but fail to penetrate into it. This distinction that Murty draws between knowledge of the existence of God and knowledge of God, between attainment of divinity and penetrating divinity, helps him in the development of vibhūti. We may, of course, we may also disagree with him and point out the limitations of his view, but look at the way he is trying to develop his theistic metaphysics and try to present beyond Advaitic notion. That's what I wanted to emphasize. So he doesn't want to go with Advaita Vedanta, and he wants to interpret the tradition from a different perspective than Shankara's Advaita Vedanta. That's what you would find here. Vibhūti in this way bridges the divine abyss between knowledge of God and knowledge of his existence, and thus makes the human endeavor to penetrate the divinity possible. Now, briefly, let me try to explain how Shipra, you can stop me if I'm crossing the limits of my time. Okay.
No, you have 10 to 12 minutes. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely fine for me, because I have 2-3 points to complete. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So if we ask this question, because in the beginning I have raised this question, why Murty's thought remains profoundly relevant now to young scholars, especially who are navigating the tension between heritage that we inherit and the modernity or the contemporariness in which we are living. In an era marked by the double challenge of global intellectual homogenization and assertive cultural identity, in which all of us are continuously, the researcher, Indian philosophy researcher, often finds themselves caught between these two poles: fidelity to inherited traditions and responsiveness to contemporary critical thought. Satchidananda Murty's philosophy speaks directly to this tension. So that's what I thought. That is how I thought he is very important to us. His life and work offers a model of how one can engage deeply with Indian philosophical heritage while also embracing the responsibility of critical inquiry and philosophical self-renewal. I'm emphasizing this philosophical self-renewal that he talks about. Murty never approached tradition as a frozen archive of reverence. For example, if you remember, Professor Dayakrishna called Indian philosophy to be something that was mummified, frozen, and being transmitted from generation to generation without alteration, right? But Murty would say he himself never approached Indian tradition as a frozen archive of reverence. He treated it as a living intellectual resource. He was unafraid to critique the canonical positions of Indian thought, be it Advaita Vedanta, spiritual exceptionalism, and orientalist caricatures of Indian passivity. Yet he did so from within. That is how I was mentioning about C.D. Sebastian's remark, heterodox insider. This stance is particularly instructive for all of us who are doing Indian philosophy today, because we may feel pressured to either uncritically affirm tradition or entirely reject it in favor of Western paradigm. So he provides a way of dealing with it. He cautioned against both cultural arrogance and intellectual dependency. So look at the kind of binaries that he creates and says we should transcend them. That's what I felt very important reading him. He urges all the people who are doing Indian philosophy to re-engage with our traditions without succumbing to ideological rigidity or colonial inferiority complexes. His salad bowl metaphor of Indian philosophy as a site of diversity, coexistence, and internal plurality offer a compelling antidote to narrow essentialisms. Murthy's emphasis on philosophical responsibility, intellectual honesty, existential depth encourages us all to see philosophy not as a set of answers inherited from the past, but as a mode of questioning that demands clarity, courage, and critical self-involvement. In an age of rapid change and digital distraction, Murthy reminds us that philosophy is not only about argument and analysis, but also about orientation and responsibility as a way of living thoughtfully and ethically. For the, for all of us, seeking to think meaningfully at the intersection of heritage and modernity and the contemporariness, Murthy's work offers both methodological guidance and existential inspiration. He exemplifies how one can be traditional without being traditionalist, modern without being mimetic. That's how we should see his work, and his work definitely illuminates the trajectory and transformation of Indian philosophy over last century. His intellectual journey is uniquely situated within a very arc of Indian philosophy's transformation over 100 years, as I have already mentioned at the beginning itself, from late colonial period to post-independent nation building and into contemporary globalized context. His work not only reflects but also critically shapes and illuminates his evolving trajectory. For example, in the 20th century, Indian philosophy was often presented either as spiritual antidote to the materialism of the West or as a cultural heritage to be defended in the face of colonial denigration. Thinkers like Radhakrishnan, as I pointed out, focused on the spiritual universality of Vedanta, often blending theology with philosophy. Murthy, while deeply respectful of these efforts, moved beyond these apologetics to a deeper interrogation of philosophical categories, refusing to reduce Indian thought to mystical idealism. So that's his greatest, inspiring contribution. He brought Indian philosophy out of its reactive posture. No, we understand the difference between reaction and response. So his way of looking at things is in terms of response, repositioning it as proactive, critically engaged discipline. His critique of the homogenizing portrayal of Indian spirit and insistence on its internal diversity mark a significant philosophical maturity in the post-independent discourse. That's how, and to look at his work further, during a time when many philosophical traditions worldwide were shifting towards linguistic analysis, logical positivism, and later postmodern skepticism, Murthy is the one who appears to be defending metaphysics as a necessity. This is another interesting thing. Like all the other philosophers of his time were, in fact, asking people to go beyond metaphysics or reject metaphysics. But he is the only one who says metaphysics is a necessity. It's not an obsolete kind of one. But he did so not in the style of rigid scholasticism. Instead, he reconceived metaphysics as a self-conscious, faith-rooted inquiry, a vision where being, value, and beauty converge in a theistic but critical framework. So he never left this criticality of whatever concept that he has picked up. In doing so, he offered a distinctively Indian response to global anti-metaphysical turn, one that reclaimed metaphysics not as a dogma, but as a mode of responsible engagement with mystery, meaning, and human condition. There was a kind of reworking on Indian categories through cross-cultural philosophy that he has done. His method was both comparative and constructive. He brought classical Indian concepts like Sat, Vibhūti, Paramartha into a dialogue with Western notions of being, transcendence, and epistemology. He also wrote on Far Eastern philosophies that I have already mentioned to you. Ultimately, it's like if we are looking at Murty, he shifted the orientation of Indian philosophy from seeing tradition as a closed canon uh, to treating it as a ongoing task of reinterpretation, discernment, and creative fidelity. In doing so, he anticipated and perhaps laid the groundwork for the emergent projects of philosophical uh, intercultural hermeneutics and transformative pedagogy. So, if we are looking at Satchidananda Murty and the ethics of his philosophical responsibility that he, emphasizes, this is the last point, Shipra. I understand that you want me to stop. Yeah. For Satchidananda Murty, philosophy was never merely an academic exercise alone. Nor was the philosopher simply a custodian of inherited doctrines, according to him. That is how he did not just accept whatever was presented. Okay. He envisioned philosophy as a life-orienting vocation, and the philosopher as someone who must engage with both truth and transformation, tradition and responsibility. At the heart of his vision lies Murthy deeply is ethical notion of philosophical responsibility is what he has emphasized in his works. So that's how he sees philosopher to be not a custodian, no, beyond custodianship. It's like he would encourage people to work towards transmission to transformation. That's what he would emphasize if we are looking at his work. This kind of a reimagining opens up Indian philosophy to innovation within fidelity, enabling the philosopher to contribute to the living tradition rather than merely echoing what was stated in the past, like whatever formulations that were presented in the past. And we also find in him a kind of truth as something that is truth to be a commitment rather than something that you possess. Okay. So his metaphysical reflections, especially his distinction between knowledge of God, God's existence, and knowing God, highlight profound insight where truth is not something to be possessed, but something to be lived towards. Philosophical responsibility means remaining open to mystery of being, to that which exceeds rational grasps, while still pursuing understanding with clarity and humility. So he also calls for philosophical responsibility to be entailing moral discernment. He viewed the highest action as arising not from impulse or ideology, but from what he called the contemplation of the spirit. In other words, ethical action must be rooted in the self-awareness, spiritual clarity, and philosophical depth, according to him. Uh, 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 just to summarize whatever that I said, uh, his idea of philosophical responsibility redefines the philosopher not as a mere transmitter of ancient systems, but as one who is accountable to truth, answerable to conscience, and responsive to the evolving need of the society. Such a vision not only aligns with classical Indian ideals of say, for example, Rishi or Jnani or Seer that we often talk about in classical Indian tradition, but also resonates with contemporary calls for public philosophy, ethical leadership, and intellectual courage. So this is how when I my reading of Kotta Satchidananda Murty goes. I think I can stop here so that we can have some discussion, I believe. Uh, I must confess
Thank
one thing.
you.
Though I have been reading Murthy's works for past at least 6-7 years. I can't claim to be an expert on Satchidananda Murty because the you already understood the kind of diverse domains that he has entered into, and also his work uh, is a bit tough to understand. And though there are some positions which can be very clear, but there are some positions which are very difficult to get into. So that's how you can excuse me if I fail to respond to some of the questions that may come up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, sir. And it was such an interesting lecture and wonderfully delivered. And even I don't know about K. Satchidananda Murty, but we have so many new faces. Also, we have so many familiar faces of philosophy here, and they can start the discussion and will know more about K.S. Murty.
Okay,
Uh,
Shibra, may I ask?
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Balaji, thank you very much for giving us a very informative talk and accepting that that it is not complete. So I would like you to complete the talk by informing us about some of K. Satchidanand's views on, number one, when he talks about cultural rootedness, then what is his idea of Indian culture? What is his idea of caste and Hinduism? As he has also written about the philosophy of religion. So how he looks at Hinduism and the role of caste in it. Somewhere I have read long back that he was very much against Brahmanism. So how he distinguishes Brahmanism from Hinduism and how that reflects in Indian philosophy and the development of Indian philosophy. This is a question to be answered. Again, when he talks about heterodoxy, then he must also be talking about the naturalistic and the atheistic traditions of Indian philosophy. So what was his take on them? Because ultimately he goes back to Vedanta. So when he talks about reason and then what are the arguments in favor of Vedanta? Because he cannot accept the argument of that subjectivity and all that which is given by the Vedantics for the time immemorial. But in the end, I would ask you to show some light on how he looks at transformation. Because when we talk about transformation in Indian tradition, it is mostly individual subjective transformation. Did he not talk about social transformation? Because he was very keen on education and all that. And if he talks about social transformation, then we will have to look into his social and political philosophy too. I am reminded of his work on word peace also. So how looks at word peace, I think that will be very relevant today. So I think instead of leaving these things for the scholars to read themselves, since you are a scholar of Satchidananda Murty, I would like you to throw some light on these topics too. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know you're always there to engage and raise some interesting points with regard to my talk, especially for today. Thank you so much for those 3 questions, Alokji. The first one is with regard to the cultural rootedness of Indian tradition. I mean, how does he see? He, as I already mentioned and repeatedly emphasized, he gives importance to cultural rootedness. But cultural rootedness doesn't mean blind acceptance of what the culture is as it is transmitted to the present. So it's like critically engaging with the cultural rootedness of the individual, and that's what makes him a heterodox insider. That's what takes me to the second point as well. In this regard, as you have rightly pointed out, he was against the caste structures, and he did not accept this caste system that was existent. But people may argue a different perspective as well. I don't want to get into that controversy, but otherwise, he was very critical of Hinduism and the caste structure that has got evolved. And this is available in this work on Indian spirit. in a detailed way. One can have a look at it. The second point that you're asking me to respond is, what about this naturalistic and atheistic traditions, and what kind of rationality, beyond subjectivity that was existent? Of course, as I have mentioned, he has. I mean, heterodoxy. Don't see heterodoxy as something like we define loosely in terms of heterodox philosophical traditions to be Jainism, Buddhism, etc. No, heterodoxy was a part of orthodoxy as well. When you see Sankhya, atheistic Sankhya becoming theistic Sankhya, or when you see Nyaya becoming Navya, coming up with Navya Nyaya. So orthodoxy always has heterodoxy embedded within it. In fact, the heterodoxy within orthodoxy is the soul of orthodoxy. That's what prompts it to be vibrant and still grow further and responding to the attacks from outside. So similar kind of thing is there even in the heterodox, so-called heterodoxy that you talk about. It has heterodoxy and it has its own orthodoxy as well built into it. So that is how, for me, the term, the conception of heterodoxy itself is loosely applied on Indian tradition. That's my personal opinion. But otherwise, he is definitely a heterodox scholar in the sense that I am referring to. It's like not accepting whatever is given, but trying to critically engage with each of the conceptualizations, and then that is how moving forward. This is what takes me to third question that you are asking. In fact, though you said that he sided with Advaita Vedanta, in my talk now, I have argued and tried to establish that he was not siding with Advaita Vedanta.
No. He was not siding with Advaita Vedanta. It's very clear.
So it's not subjectivity, pure subjectivity that he was trying to support. No, it's not Aham Brahmasmi in the non-dualistic sense that no, he doesn't go with. In fact, he goes with Ramanuja more, and that is how the third question that you are asking, like he would be more towards social transformation because he gives importance to the other and the transformation that happens at the social realms as well. The last point that you have mentioned is very important, which I could not touch much in my talk, referring to political philosophy. Of course, his contributions to political philosophy ought to be looked at. In fact, I did not get much time to talk about that aspect. And his conception of peace as well is very important. In fact, I missed another interesting point, which is his definition of suffering. He gives a different, unique kind of definition of suffering that is also very important to look at. Of course, I didn't get much time. I would definitely encourage the audience to have a look at his works so that you would see how much diversity that was existent, that is already there for us to have a look at, so that we can enrich our own understanding of modern Indian philosophy. That's where I would stop. Thank you so much for these three important questions, Alokji.
Thank you, Balaji.
So it goes very interesting, and I would like to invite Prashant Shukla sir. Yeah.
Thank you, Bala sir, for a very, very interesting exposition. Let me confess, because I knew that you are going to speak in the evening, so I was just going to do my homework with this book, Philosophy in India. My concern is, of course, you started very appropriately by making a distinction between history and historiography with particular reference to Murty. Now, in this particular book, Murty clearly asserts that there are three ways of doing philosophy. Either we are doing analytical philosophy, or continental philosophy, or speculative philosophy. Now, if he himself says so, so at least some kind of foundationalism he himself is accepting, isn't it? Now the point is this: if you are accepting at least this kind of foundationalism, so we cannot evade the question that out of all these three ways of philosophy, he calls it the modes of philosophy. Indian philosophy by nature is speculative in nature. I mean, more or so, not all, barring the exceptions, but more so, Indian philosophy has got some sort of speculative tilt or inclination involved. But in that case, you are very right in saying that heterodoxy and orthodoxy are merged with each other. Let's say Vivekanand, when he gives a speech in Chicago, he says, go back to the Vedas. But once he comes back to the India, he says, arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. So these are appearing contradictory objectives, but they are well merged in Vedanta. Maybe that is the reason that Vedanta is accepted, and we get clear glimpses even in Murty. So in the final version, it appears that he has got some sort of sympathies with the spiritual trend in Indian philosophy. What would be your observation on that, sir? Am I going on the right track or not? Thank you, sir.
Perfect. Thank you so much for those observations, Prashant. I completely agree with your point with regard to heterodoxy and also with regard to a sort of foundationalism to which Murty appears to be resorting to, though he is trying to demolish that at the same time. I believe my reading is that, yeah, definitely he accepts philosophy to be something like speculative, and he encourages us to be siding with speculative philosophy more than any other form of philosophy. And that is how the theistic metaphysics that I was referring to, and also the distinction between knowledge of the God and knowledge of the existence of the God, etc. So these things strongly inform us that he is more towards speculative philosophy, and in that particular sense, he is the only one probably during his time who was siding with metaphysics and arguing that metaphysics is still core and fundamental, So we definitely find that. Thank you so much for those very important observations. I agree with them.
Okay, thank you, Prashant sir. We have a question, or what we can say, it's an observation from Rachel Nikita. Nikita, you can ask directly to the sir. Rachel? Yeah. Tulika Gupta, please go ahead.
Good evening, all the professors. Bala sir, thank you so much for this insightful talk. But sir, I have to agree that I am really confused right now after what we just talked about. First of all, I'd like to mention about the immanent transcendence that you talked about. It is just, is it just looking at things with flexibility? I mean, as in it is mysterious yet interpenetrating. But how do we find the similarity or maybe a common denominator within both these contradictions, right? And let's say maintain a balance between heritage and modernity. And by the end of, like, in the last question, uh, my mind is really confused because I find through this discussion that there's a blur line between heterodoxy and orthodoxy. So could you please, sir, help me with that?
Yeah, if you're confused and disturbed, that's what philosophy must do. So, which means you are on the right path. Philosophical inquiry begins with doubt, and it has to continue with belief as well. But otherwise, I just I want you to look at this. Whatever we find as binaries, probably they are not binaries. Okay. Probably, for example, orthodoxy and heterodoxy, these two appear to be binaries, opposites to each other. Okay, but when you contextualize them, they don't appear to be binaries or opposites to each other. This is what I was trying to establish. I mean, what Satchidananda Murty also tries to present. As I tried to refer in my previous response to Alokji, when you talk about, say, for example, we present orthodox philosophical systems and heterodox philosophical systems, right? So if you look at any of these orthodox philosophical systems, your definition, whatever definition that you may come up with of orthodoxy, would definitely fail when you look at that particular system. I mean, I'm giving the freedom to you to come up with your own definition of orthodoxy, and then contextually look at any philosophical system of orthodoxy, and you would find that this definition doesn't fit into that. Because at the same time, though you call it orthodoxy, it also has the opposite of it within itself. That's so. Say, for example, Sankhya is said to be parallel almost to Vedic tradition, and it continued until now. How and why it could happen? It could happen because it was continuously being debated within, which means the heterodoxy exists within itself. Okay, so that's one thing. Since you also refer to immanence and transcendence, in philosophy of religion, we refer to these concepts like, I think it's Rodolphe Otto who talks about the divine to be mysterium. I forgot the word that he uses, the phrase that he uses, where he says there is a kind of overpoweringness of the divinity that you find when you come across the divine. Okay, so this is possible because it is both immanent and transcendent as well at the same time. Say, for example, if I ask you, is it that oxygen is only outside you or inside you? It is both outside you and inside you everywhere as well. So there is a kind of strong immanence and transcendence as well of the divinity. That is possible. So, I mean, these terms or concepts were presented to us as binaries, but actually they are not binaries. That's what I was trying to emphasize. And if you can reach out to that and try to understand these concepts to be probably complementary, probably trying to enhance our understanding of the being itself, the metaphysical being itself, then I think that's the proper way of looking at it, as especially from the perspective of Satchidananda Murty. So I don't know whether I made it clear or confused you more.
No, sir,
But that's how
I
I
got
would
it right now, because I was thinking about the similarity it has with the Shaivism, Shiva and Shakti, how contradictories are somehow complementaries. So that's where I felt it is similar. Thank you so much for
the
the answer.
problem is, can we use the word contradictories to them? Is itself a big question. No?
That's true.
For instance, I
We can
emphasize this
use
point that,
complementary, I think. Sir?
yeah, this point that I emphasize regularly in my talks is Indian tradition is not fixed on binary epistemology. All the philosophical systems of India try to push you to go beyond binary epistemology. Binary epistemology tries to present the world, or at least conceptual world, in terms of two opposites. Okay, which means whatever that you find here will have an opposite here, and in order to understand this, you have to look at the opposite of it and try to understand each one of them to be the absence of the other. This is how binary epistemology operates. But actually, if you look at Buddhism, it argues for Madhya Marga. Look at Jainism, it argues for Anekantavada and Syadvada. And you look at Advaita Vedanta, it would argue for Anirvachaniya. It would say you cannot describe it because it is real and unreal at the same time. So most of the philosophical systems of India, if not all, try to constantly push us to go beyond binary epistemology. But unfortunately, our whole school education system, our epistemologies are built on the binary-ness. We have to somehow, that's one of the reasons why we should get back to our traditional modes of epistemologies, so that we would be able to see things. This is what is cultural rootedness, and looking at developing cultural epistemologies is very important to us. If we lose these cultural epistemologies, then we would only have a homogeneous way of looking at the reality, which could be a very destructive and devastating one for whole humanity. The worry is whether AI is trying to create such homogeneous epistemology for all of us is the concern. Now, even in that context, it is important for us to nurture our cultural epistemologies. I'm sorry if I have taken too much time in responding to you.
Yes, we have
Yeah.
an observation from Dr. Sujata Raju. Ma'am, please ask. And it is going very well, sir. I mean,
Thank you.
so interesting.
Professor Bala, namaskaram. Namaskaram to everybody.
Namaste. Oh,
Namaste. Namaste, ma'am.
please.
Namaskar. Actually, sir, it's just a curiosity. It's not a question, actually. And till now, I have read many books from Professor Bala Subramaniam, Professor Srinivas Rao, Professor Vijinathan, Professor Ranade. They all say K.S. Murthy was an Advaitin, staunch Advait philosopher. What you say, sir, what I gathered from your lecture, he's a completely Advaitin because he's saying the core of our being is metaphysics. We cannot ignore metaphysics. But people said, even Ranade says K.S. Murthy was a realized master. I have read it, sir. What is your view, sir?
Yeah, this
Can we
last
keep him?
question.
Can you say Professor K.S. Murthy is an Advaitin, like other South Indian philosophers, like I named just now? But they all say, whenever I attended some refresher courses somewhere, they say K.S. Murthy is an Advaitin. Do you consider that, sir?
Yeah.
If you say yes, I'll
In
be
fact,
happy.
no, let me respond.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, I don't know about this Ranade's quote that you are mentioning, so I cannot respond to that unless I read it on my own. That's number
Okay,
one.
sir.
Number two is Professor R. Balasubramaniam is the one who has edited a volume on K. Satchidananda Murty.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. Yes.
And his article is the very first article. In fact, a very detailed account of theistic metaphysics of Kota Satchidananda Murty that he
Yes,
presents,
sir.
Professor R. Balasubramanian presents in his article. Okay. It is, K.S. Murthy can be seen as Vedantin, but not as Advaita Vedantin. Okay. Probably most of them were saying that he can be considered to be belonging to Vedantic tradition, but because he wrote about Vedic hermeneutics, etc., because he tried to give his own hermeneutical perspective of Vedanta. So that is how he definitely can be seen as Vedantin or some Vedantic thought existent in his work, but you cannot, I believe, see him as complete Advaita Vedantin. Okay. I don't think I read R. Balasubramaniam's article on Satchidananda Murty. He doesn't seem to claim that Satchidananda Murty accepts Advaita Vedanta in total. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
ma'am. Sir, we are having so many questions on YouTube also, and you can respond to this later on because we are ahead of time now. And I would like to invite Professor Balram Singh sir for his observations. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sipra. It was really wonderful to listen. Right from the beginning, when you said that you think that philosophy in India is in some sense suffering from the laziness or something of, I'll just put maybe a little bit of scientific terminology, inertia. I think there is an inertia. Why it is, somebody like Radhakrishnan or Murthy, they have dwelt on these issues because they had to, that time was very different. So I'm not very sure whether it was in their inner call or it was their outer circumstance. If it was inner call, it is Advaitic. If it was outer focus, then it was Dvaitic with Vedanta. I think.
In fact, that's his own statement.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Laziness is his own statement.
Yeah.
Satchidananda Murty's own statement.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
yeah.
my
And
statement.
I'm glad that he did mention that. He must have observed that, and I continue to observe that, although I'm not a philosopher at all. I find the inertia being a major reason why the world is suffering. In 2003, I attended a conference in India International Center, which was ICPR had organized it, and that was my first interaction with formal philosophers. That the outside world thinks India does not have philosophy. That was the issue. The External Affairs Ministry had summoned ICPR to discuss this, that they don't have philosophy. All these things happen because of inertia. If you are active, then people know you what you are, and they wouldn't be asking these questions, these silly questions.
In fact, the exact word that he has used is lethargy, not even
lethargy.
laziness.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah, lethargy among professional philosophers. That's what he refers to.
Okay, that makes it. Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah,
maybe not lazy as much of a lethargy. And why is lethargy allowed? How this has happened? How does this happen? It depends on the society, and of course inner call, but mostly on society. I think Indian academia is very lethargic. That includes science. We have first-hand experience. So the philosophy is very important, in my opinion, to get people up to start thinking. And since that is lethargic, I think science is even more. So I'm just telling you that most of the thing that we are bragging about, most of it, I wouldn't say all of it, is they have copied science, technology from outside, and sometimes secretly, and then tell that this is all Indian innovation. Even the biggest ones that they're talking about, they may be able to do, including somebody like what is his name, Infosys Narayan Murthy, another Murthy we are talking about. A wonderful work they have done. His wife is also wonderful, but they haven't innovated anything. It's all because of lethargy. Why lethargy? Because they can get it from somewhere, and then they brag about it. So I think it is an important issue to think about, not only this discussion that I'm observing, but also, you said something, there was some conversation about metaphysical versus physical. I think only this Indian philosophers can address this through Indian philosophy. When you're talking about, there is no Advaitic if there is no Dvaitic. And there is no Dvaitic if there is no path to Advaitic. It's just, you have to go back and forth. So this issue, to me, it looks like useless to talk about somebody is Advaitic, somebody is this. They have to know the both of them to talk about it. It may be the path at the point of time may be something different, because that may be the need of the time, either in academia or in the society. So I like a person like you who has really very good grasp of all this, and the scholars in the field also, to please mentor the younger generation. And in Kesas, I think Sipra can attest to that. We are telling every philosophy faculty to develop their own philosophies. We are not happy to just talking about somebody. I want to know their philosophy. What is their philosophy? What is their approach to life? Wherever they are coming from. Because that's one of the ways that I think about, is that Aham Brahmasmi. The phrase of Aham Brahmasmi will be, they will have to confront it. So anyway, I do not want to make it a big deal about my opinion about it. But Kesas is very much on the, as you can see, on the top, and Sipra has done a marvelous job for last year and a half. So doing this philosophy cafe idea, we have been collaborating with Alok Tandon, Prasant Sukla, and others, and we are really looking forward to guidance, because we really want to make change. We want to make difference, not change. We want to make a difference. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. And I want to share one thing that Bala sir is also taking in charge of Philosophy Cafe in Delhi. And so please tell me about something uh, that cafe.
Yeah, basically, my conception of philosophical cafe is a bit different from what is happening here, because I see philosophical cafe to be an instrument that helps us to reach out to non-philosophical academy, non-philosophical domain. I mean, what I mean is, philosophical cafe is a wonderful instrument for public philosophy. One of the major problems with philosophical academia in India is it's a kind of snobbishness that only we do philosophy, nobody else does philosophy. So I believe outside academia also there is a lot of philosophy, and outside academia people are interested to know what is happening in philosophy. So how do we bridge, this inquisitive minds that are existent outside philosophical domain to reach out to what we are doing or what we have been doing in philosophical domain is one of the important aspects. So that is how, for me, philosophical cafe facilitates a kind of interaction of academic philosophers with the general public. That's number one. The second aim of philosophical cafe for me is to encourage people to philosophize. So this is again like we think that only we philosophize, and I believe that if we interact with, I mean, outside our philosophy departments, even if we interact with other departments and try to engage with them, we also see them to be philosophizing. So encouraging others also to philosophize in the smallest way that is possible, right? So this is where philosophical cafe is a very important aspect of enriching public epistemologies with what is happening in philosophy. If we can't reach out to them and tell them that this is what we are doing, and if we are happy that we are doing something, we don't have to reach out to others, then I believe that is the major crisis into which we are led to. So that's how I was also reading Satchidananda Murty in terms of a public philosopher who is trying to reach out to others. I mean, non-Anglophone academia of philosophers. So that's the
It's
goal
interesting,
of
sir. Yeah,
philosophical cafe for me. Yeah.
I will
Sorry.
definitely join you, sir, there. Yeah.
Sir, what do you mean exactly by public philosopher? A philosopher who is communicating with the public, or a public person who has the aspiration to become a philosopher? Because these two are totally different things.
I think a public philosopher should have a blend of both. Right?
So we had organized yeah. Please go
Don't you
ahead.
think a minimal sort of training is required to
Definitely.
even talk philosophy?
Definitely. But if we think that only by teaching in the classrooms we can train, and nobody else, outside classrooms cannot be trained in philosophy, is a kind of probably academic arrogance that I would consider. So that's the only thing. I'm aware of the limitations of carrying philosophy outside academia, but I am also aware of the limitations of limiting it within academia, within the classroom walls, and saying that this is the only way that we can do. So how do we bring these two or bridge the gap between these two is an important exercise in which all of us have to get involved, I believe. Yeah, we may have differences of opinions regarding how do we do that, etc. But I believe the discussion has to happen, and somewhere it has to begin. Even if people criticize, it has to begin. Otherwise, like we know, not many departments are alive, not many philosophy departments are alive, and very soon we will become endangered species in India. And then what will happen if we don't enrich public epistemologies with the usefulness of philosophy to their lives? and to all our lives, not just to our academic careers. So that's where I'm worried about.
So we had organized a similar kind of symposium on World Philosophy Day. It was about flicker thinkers of Bharat, flicker philosophers of Bharat, and it was so interesting. And the theme you have just discussed about, it was very similar to that. And
Okay.
it is uploaded on our YouTube channel. You can watch that.
I will definitely. Thank you so much for suggesting that to me.
Thank you so much, sir. And now I must extend my sincere regards to Professor Balaganapathi, sir. I'm also grateful to all our participants here and also who have joined us on YouTube Live. I really appreciate their contribution, and we will appreciate your contribution in the upcoming episodes of Philosophy Cafe. Wish to have you all in our upcoming episodes. Till then, namaskar. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate the Institute of Advanced Study and also Kuru School of Advanced Sciences for this kind invitation, and Shipra for wonderfully coordinating it and making this very vibrant. Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I wish to invite you for philosophical counseling also, sir, in the upcoming episodes.
I'll be more than happy to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Namaste.
Record.